Next speaker is Erlend Aune. He is an associate professor in data science at BI and also head of Simla at BI. And he also brings a lot of experience from working with several startups and also co-founding startups. So Erlend Aune, please come to the floor. And he will be giving us some information around the differences between AI in research and or AI research in established companies and startups.
Thank you, Freya. So, yeah, the idea here is to tell a little bit about my experience in about this research in startups versus established organizations / academics. I must say that from the beginning that my kind of view on this is biased towards the kind of companies that I've been working in. So I've been working primarily in finance and media type companies. So my perspective is based on my sort of perspectives are based on that. And it's also personal opinions that some people may disagree about, but I think that's fine. It's sort of people will have their own opinions about these things. But this presentation is more about what I think are some perspectives on what is perhaps different from academia or established in companies, and how can you think about research when in a more constrained environment like a startup is. So when I say startup here, I may actually mean two things. A startup may be a real startup, like a newly founded company. But it can also be something like you have a newly established AI team within an established organization where that hasn't been part of value creation a priori. So this has been quite common within the data science and AI space for quite some time in Norway, and it still is quite common that people hire people from academia or research organization to start their AI business within the organization to see if it's possible to create value there, and then it's sort of started within a company kind of setting. And by established organizations, I mean academia is one type of organization like that, but it can also be an organization that has already value roadmaps associated to AI research. So I think one thing that is extremely important when transitioning from like academia to or established organization to this kind of startup setting is knowing what to improve. This in academia, it's usually quite established what kind of metrics that you care about, what kind of problems one studies. But this is when you come into a completely new company. This is something that has to be established based on what the product or what kind of service that company is providing, and I think that I've seen this so many times that you have people coming into an organization or starting up a company, and they don't know what they have a lot of know-how on how to build models, machine learning models, but what kind of models, what do you actually care about from the product perspective to improve? That is something that is under communicated, I think, and it's something that is extremely important to spend time to figuring out. Okay, what are the important parts to improve in the business? And of course, if you are in academia or in an established organization, these kind of metrics may have been well established, and you know that if you improve certain aspects of the product or the service, you will generate more revenue. But in like smaller organizations, companies or smaller organizations, this is really important to try to figure out. I think it's important to think very hard about these things quite early in the process, so that you don't spend a lot of time on developing methodology and models that doesn't improve what you actually care about. But of course, of course, yeah, and that this is yeah, this is something that I've seen many times. So if you talk to, for instance, people who business people, they can tell something about what is important. These are examples of metrics that can be important from like an investor or like from a business, from the CEO, for instance, of a company. Could be things like user adoption, that you increase production. You want to increase the production of a certain product, or you may want to change the cost. But it's all. But how to define these high-level metrics is usually quite easy. But going from those high-level metrics to low-level metrics that you can actually measure and correlate with performance of machine learning models is require usually some time and also a lot of conversation with the business people. And another thing is that the metrics that you have, they often change a lot. Once you learn more about the process, one can improve on the metrics you care about. An example in journalism is that, let's say in the 90s or even before that, maybe 90s is a good decade. People cared a lot about clicks. So if you go to a newspaper and you click, what people will care about is that you click on an article or click on a product or whatever. But now people have learned more about how people consume content. What is the thought process of a person doing that? And a better metric for instance, journalism today is engagement of the user. That the user spends time and finds it interesting to consume the content that the platform has. And of course, measuring clicks is easy. Measuring engagement is harder. And of course, you need to find proxies to do this. And then of course, the next question would be, okay, how can I use machine learning to improve engagement, for instance, and improve the sub-metrics that you may be interested here. So one thing that I think also is quite important in doing machine learning in industrial context, especially when you're constrained, resource constrained, is to just admit that sometimes you have to abandon a certain line of research, even if you see that, okay, this line of research is really can be really profitable in 10 years. It may not be worth pursuing in the short term, and you don't have the luxury to pursue such a line of research in such a constrained environment. So I think this kind of, so I'll go to the next slide. So in product development, they have many sort of schemas and ways to think about such processes. I think there's a lot startups from this kind of process, and one can think about the AI services or AI part of the products that you're creating as a sort of product development. Of course, you have to modify some parts of the process to adapt it to AI and research. But there are a lot of similarities and things to learn from people who are doing product development, I think. How do I go back? Oh. Oh, it was hidden. Let's see. Oh, great. Yeah. yeah, and another thing is that a lot of the time when you work in academia, one may have a perfectionist perspective on doing research, that you want a perfect kind of, you want to showcase every aspect of the research, and it's usually you don't have time for these kind of things. But one thing that I think is really important is to actually document the efforts, so that you can revisit these ideas later in time, because it may be that you learn something new, and then it's easier to go forward in that direction at a later stage. So one thing that I think is very important, that is sort of that a lot of people don't think that much about, is analytics. How can you measure how well the model is doing, and how well it correlates with what you're interested in, and what measuring practices do we need in order to get those measurements. So I mean, measurement, what kind of measuring practices is based on, obviously, on the kind of company you have. It could be sensors if you're working on industrial monitoring, for instance. It could be sensors on factories and stuff like that. But if you work on like web applications, it could be instrumentation of web pages, or it could also be questionnaires. But the chances are that all these kind of things, if in a startup, will need to be defined by a team of machine learning people or data scientists, plus the domain experts. It's not something that is defined a priori. So it's not something that you need to learn how to do these kind of things in order to measure and monitor the things that you need. This is something that I think is very important when you develop machine learning products in real life and apply to real kind of situations. You rarely experience static environments. They change over time, and you need to monitor how the model's performance over time to measure distribution shift, when to retrain models. You need to learn stuff like ML ops to know when to retrain models, how to deploy them, when to deploy them, those kinds of things. And in a startup, you usually don't have a team that does only these things. You have to learn these things and find ways to deal with this. And one thing that I think and I think this is one of the key points that I have in this presentation, and it's also something that was mentioned in the previous presentation, is to communicate with non-researchers is key to have success with the doing AI, because if you only talk to people who actually, to peers that have the same understanding of the world as yourself, then you're not, maybe you don't understand why a product is important to the user or the business owner. And be sure that as a researcher you understand this. I think it's extremely important. And how to share knowledge, how to communicate with people, non-technical people, the kind of thing that you're doing from an AI perspective is key to have success and traction with both within the organization, but also when, let's say that you're doing some research and the CEO or the COO or something of the company is going out to talk to potential customers, to have the language, to know that they are presenting a realistic image of what the research is doing is very important, I think. And that's both for like getting traction of the product, but also for getting funding for the particular project in an early phase. Another key thing I think is that I think is very important is this kind of situation where you have long and short-term horizon problems with long and short-term horizons. So or at least in the startups that I've been involved, there are always things that are wrong with a system or the model or whatever. the production system may fail, models may fail in corner cases. There are always small issues that needs to be fixed on a short term time span. Of course, that needs to be prioritized to a certain extent, but at the same time, there are some long-term goals that you need to improve in order to actually get the platform, get the product to the place where you want it to be. And the challenge, of course, is how to make time for long-term research processes when there's always something that may go wrong with something that affects user in a very short time span. This is also something that I've seen several times, is that people come in and there's always something burning, and they prioritize always fixing the short-term things while not prioritizing to having time for the long-term research that will actually elevate the platform to the next level. And I think it's really important to be aware of this and make sure that people in the organization understand that prioritizing long-term goals is important, even if there are things burning, even in a startup. So an example of this that I've dealt with a couple of times is scaling, for instance. So you may have a model that works well for like something that scales for something like 10 requests per second, a machine learning model. Maybe fine for whatever is going on right now, but then you need to scale this 100-fold to take on the next customer. How can you then? Of course, this is not something that you will be expected that you can solve in just a short amount of time. It actually takes some time to scale a system 100-fold, and you need to find time and a way to work on doing this at the same time. I think this is just an example of such a situation. I think yeah. So I think my point is that it's important for an organization to be aware of the need of long-term research, and let's say that you come in as a researcher in a startup. Maybe you're not the founder. But you're going to be the main person, for instance, for doing AI research. It's important that the people in that organization know that this is something that may be important, so that you are not just spending all your time doing the short-term things. Yeah, I think this is another aspect that I found is, and I think it's a nice one, is that in a startup one is often expected to do many things, not just research. So if you're working on an AI team of maybe 2-3 people, one may be expected to do ML ops, managing training, deployment of models, real-time monitoring, versioning of models, how and when models are triggered, those kind of things, in addition to traditional type research. These are things that are obviously not covered in standard academic research, and maybe not in like big companies' research groups either. Another aspect is data engineering, and that involves how to get data into the AI system, cleaning, transforming data, and this is also can be a very complicated process. Of course, it depends on the kind of business you're in, but learning this, expecting to do some data engineering, I think is reasonable for most situations. One thing that I've found particularly useful is to spend time and work together with software engineers. Software engineers, they have a lot of experience with tools that are similar to what one needs in stuff like ML ops and those kinds of things, and they also have a lot of tooling and experience in how to maintaining quality over time. That I think most researchers in the ML AI space don't have a priori, and it's something that I think is a very nice experience to work together with good software engineers to learn those skills, and actually also produce more reproducible workflows, and can even improve the research, I think, in many cases. And it leads to something that you have, where you have a situation where you have an interplay between roles. A researcher may not only be doing research. Researcher may be doing MLOps, maybe doing marketing, maybe doing several kinds of things that are not related to to standard research. And I think that's both very challenging, but also very rewarding if one takes the time and actually learn those things. So the main points that I wanted to make is that I think the first point there is maybe what I think is the most important point: to communicate with non-researchers and find out what drives adoption, what drives investments, those kinds of things. Extremely important. Startups are fast-paced. There's always short-term things to fix, and finding ways to combine short-term versus long-term research is very important. And having a varied skill set, skilling up on areas that are related to research, I think is not related to research, I think is important. But of course, every startup is different. In some cases, it's maybe you actually have the possibility to have roles that are purely research oriented, but I don't think that's the norm, not from what I've seen at least. Yes, those were the points.
Thank you very much, Erlend. We have time for a question or two. There are any online questions with that?
Okay.
It seems like you compare academia and university. Is that true, or like university special challenges or?
Yeah. So the question in my slides, I equal in some sense large organizations with academia, and I think, and the question was, is that really true? And I think it's not in many cases. So one thing that I mentioned here is that it can be that you have an established organizations that does not do research from before, and then you go in there and you make a sort of startup in there, and you try to make room for that and try to help in creating the value process. But many large organizations have research groups that focus on specific kind of research, and there it's much more equal to academic research, I think, while at the same time it's more expected that you produce stuff that is used, possible to use for their specific problems, the organization's specific problems, and it's not that you expect to do publications, for instance. So there are for sure differences, but in some sense, I think they are more equal, especially if you have dedicated research groups within the organization. Yeah.
We have a question from online. What is your experience with certainty of research outcomes and promised timeline?
Yeah, that's a hard question, I think. So often it's expected that you can have that you should have some experiments that can say something about the value of a certain approach or not in a short time frame. I think often it's possible to make simple experiments that don't go the full route to see if it's possible, if this approach is viable or not, without doing the complete research. And this is something that I think it also applied to academia, like being able to experiment with the simple approaches to see if an approach is viable first, and then go more all in on the one that seems most viable in the end, and spend more resources there is reasonable. But I mean, for sure, there are many situations where you can expect that you will have some results by the end of a week or something like that, and I think it's like sometimes you are able to give a reasonable estimate on the time it will take, and that those estimates improve with experience, I think, and the knowledge of the domain. And maybe that's a reasonable thing to track in itself, the how good your estimates on making how good your estimates on making a start or making a conclusion about whether this is viable or not is a reasonable thing to do. But it's a tough. I mean, you will always come in a situation where you are not able to do what you said on time. But the question is what you do with that, and I think that's more like a discussion question, and how you deal with that in the organization. I think it can differ a lot. I didn't have a good answer to that. I'm sorry.